Nō mai, haere mai, welcome. I'm Bruce Munro, and with me is International Relations Specialist, Professor Robert Patman, and this is Global Insight. Why is the Chinese government flying massive information-gathering balloons across the United States and other countries as well? Why would they risk further eroding international goodwill towards their country? Welcome, Robert.
Morena, Bruce.
Can I ask you, do you believe, as the Chinese have said, that this is a weather balloon?
Well, the Chinese have been quite vociferous and insisted these are weather balloons that have blown off course. But we have to weigh that claim against one or two inconvenient pieces of evidence. Firstly, no other country seems to be losing control of their weather balloons on the scale that China seems to be, because, as you indicated in your opening remarks, this problem hasn't been confined to the United States. We know now the number of countries affected is 5, and it's rising. So this looks like it looks like a very severe problem of loss of control if there's a Chinese claim. Secondly, this claim about the weather balloons, it does seem extraordinary in the sense that the balloon that has drawn attention to everyone apparently had some sort of controls. For example, it hovered near military facilities in Montana. Now, this is what the Americans claim. And so the Americans claim that these are spy balloons. And on balance, I think the thing that could help resolve this argument is when the Americans make public their findings from the balloon they shot down just off the coast of Carolina. So that will help perhaps resolve some of these issues. But at the moment, the evidence suggests these were surveillance balloons.
Why has there been this sudden rash of Chinese information-gathering balloons? You know, as you've said, we've heard that there have been balloons sighted over Taiwan, Japan, the United States, and now Latin America. Why now?
Well, it would appear the balloons do have. Let's get to the nub of this. I think many of us were puzzled when these first reports came out, because you would say to yourself, what can a balloon do with surveillance capabilities that satellites can't do? And China is a space power. It has a very sophisticated network of satellites with high resolution capabilities. So they can spy as much as they like on the United States from space. So you'll say, well, why would you send a balloon? Well, the balloon does have certain advantages. It can get closer than a satellite can, at least theoretically, to the object of interest, but it can evade radar better. So that is an interesting advantage. And the reason we know this is that there were at least 4 intrusions in the United States last year, which they've only discovered retrospectively by analysing data, and they didn't discover at the time. So, you know, there is that aspect to it. And then, so if we accept that the Chinese see some value in using spy balloons, there's another question. Was it just information they were looking for? And Professor Anne-Marie Brady and a number of other observers have said no, there was an additional motivation. That is, they were testing America's ability to observe and respond to these intrusions on US airspace. In other words, information may have been part of it, and that's why the balloon hovered around the missile sites in Montana, but it may also have been to see how quickly the Americans would detect these intrusions deep in their airspace. And so in a sense, China was, you know, according to this view, the balloons had a twofold function, and they were certainly putting some political pressure on the United States in that way.
So Robert, what lessons should New Zealand take from all of this?
As far as we know, we have not been visited by these Chinese spy balloons, or weather balloons if you want the Chinese version of it. We don't have great military facilities compared with many other countries, but we do have some sensitive surveillance facilities in various parts of the country, which may be of interest. What lesson do we take? I think the lesson we take is that China, through the spy balloon program, is indicating it is a growing power. It wants to be a growing power. And the suggestion is, I think, by testing out America's reaction, excuse me, that China possibly in the long term wants to displace the United States as the leading power in the world. And the other thing is we shouldn't lose sight of here, Bruce, is that authoritarian powers do feel threatened by liberal democracies. They see them as subversive forces. And I think, in a sense, one of the lessons here is that we shouldn't necessarily assume that this is a benign authoritarian power. It certainly is demonstrating it has forward-leaning military ambitions.
As you said, the United States has failed to detect some of these objects. What lessons can New Zealand take from this?
Now, what we do know is the Americans did detect it this time, visually. I think the visual detection was, because these are quite big, these balloons, and on a clear day can be seen quite clearly from the ground. They operate about 60,000 feet. It seems to me that China is probably, this is turning into a bit of a public relations disaster for China now. And they, of course, completely denied it, but authoritarian states often do deny things which, for other people's eyes, there is clear evidence for. So we'll just have to wait and see how this plays out. We do know that Antony Blinken cancelled his visit to China, and that shows how fragile the relationship is, really, because there was an upswing in the US-China relationship after Biden and Xi Jinping had met for 3 hours at a recent international gathering, and there's certainly been some tacit cooperation going on during the Ukraine war between back channels. The journalist Owen Matthews has detailed this. So this, I'm afraid, is bad news for US-China relations. I don't think it will necessarily blow them off course, but it's certainly a significant irritant.
Thanks, Robert. And thank you for watching. Catch us next time on Global Insight. Ka kite anō.